We move on now to the imperatives. Again, I've removed the imperfects from the chart and just put the stem names above imperative and everything down below it. So we're used to seeing in the cal form that the imperative is created by removing the prefix from the second person forms. So imperfect 2ms, imperfect 2fs, imperfect 2mp, imperfect 2fp. We remove the prefixes and we end up with our imperatives. And for the PL, the same principle holds. We just take away the tav with vocal schwa and we end up with our imperative forms: paked, pakdi, pakadu, and pakedna. Note that the pual and the hofal do not have imperatives. The other forms have prefixes. The nifal, interestingly enough, has a hey as its prefix, which is a little bit odd, but it can be helpful because along with this hey prefix, we also get the characteristic commas and doubling of the first root letter for all of our imperatives. And that is a dead giveaway that we have a nifal imperative. So we have the hey prefix, which has the heric and looks a lot like an imperfect, only the hey is dropped in instead of the imperfect prefix. And then we have the same characteristic nifal commas and doubling of the first root letter. The hithpael goes back to its hey, so it has a hit, and so the hit paked, in this case, the masculine singular is exactly the same as perfect 3ms. And then the other forms have the typical imperfect endings, and so that's how you can tell them. So these are also a little strange, but not too bad to parse. And the hiphil also has a hey prefix, but in this case it has a patak, which is the normal prefix vowel for the hiphil. So the hiphil looks a lot like an imperfect with the hey dropped in instead of the imperfect prefix. And then the endings are pretty much what you'd expect. But the imperative masculine singular does not look like the second masculine singular imperfect with the prefix removed. The imperfect 2ms has a heric yod theme vowel, but the imperative 2ms has a tsera yod theme vowel. But it's still possible to parse this because you do have the hey with the patach. Patach only is a prefix vowel for the hiphil. The hey plus patach indicates imperative, or infinitive as we'll see, and the theme vowel is EI class, the same class as hiphil imperfects. The rest of the forms are exactly what you'd expect. They look like the second person forms with the hey dropped in instead of the normal prefix vowel. So the endings are what you'd expect for second feminine singular and second masculine plural and second feminine plural. So those are the imperatives. Let's look at our infinitives now. With the cal, we know that the infinitive construct is equal to the imperative masculine singular. This is true for most of the other forms. We have the nifal imperative masculine singular is equal to the infinitive construct, and the PL, the masculine singular imperative, is equal to the infinitive construct. And this is also true for the hithpael. Notice that the hithpael infinitive construct is equal to the imperative, which is also equal to the perfect 3ms. So the hithpael has quite a lot of overlap. The hiphil is our renegade again. And so now we come down here and we see that the infinitive construct is not the same as the masculine singular imperative. It goes back and takes on the heric yod theme vowel that you would have expected the imperative to have in the first place. And then, interestingly, the infinitive absolute, which we'll come to in a second, ends up looking like the masculine singular imperative. This is just a little bit of a twist. The parsing is not difficult because you have the hey with patak prefix, which tells you hiphil. You just have to remember that the hiphil has an odd imperative. And then the hofal infinitives are so rare that we're not even going to worry about them in either form. Likewise, the pual infinitive construct and infinitive absolute are so rare. There's only one example of each in the entire Bible, so we're not going to worry about these too much, although they're not too difficult to figure out. For the infinitive absolutes, we have to look at theme vowels. So for nifal, we have hippocode. It has the same prefix, the hi, plus the R1 vowel comets plus the doubling. And so hippocode, it's the theme vowel that lets us know that this is a nifal infinitive absolute. There's also an alternate nifal infinitive absolute, nifcode, and again it's the theme vowel that tells us that it is an infinitive absolute. Every once in a while this is written defectively and then it overlaps with a cal imperfect, but we don't need to worry about that for right now. The infinitive absolute in the PL is pakod. Here it is written fully, here it is written defectively. Possibly pakade, which is the identical to the infinitive construct. That's not something that we need to concern ourselves with right now. The infinitive absolute for the hithpayal is identical to the infinitive construct and also to the imperative masculine singular and the perfect 3ms. So you'll need context. And then the infinitive absolute for the hiphil, in every other stem the infinitive construct is the same as the masculine singular imperative. In this case, the infinitive absolute is the same as the masculine singular imperative. It's just one of those twists of the hiphil. So let's look at a few examples of parsing imperatives and infinitives. The first one here is hishamaru. Hishamaru. It's always important to figure out in forms like this where the root is, and it seems fairly clear that we have a root here of shamar. That would give us a hey with a hirik as a prefix. Now that could indicate a hiphil perfect, and it could indicate a nifal imperative, or possibly a nifal infinitive, either infinitive construct or infinitive absolute. So the prefix here is a hey with a hirik, and we look now at R1 vowel and R1 doubling. The R1 vowel is a comets, and there is doubling. So we have R1 doubling. This indicates then that we have a nifal. So clearly hiphil perfect does not work here, and now we're looking at either an imperative or an infinitive. There is no R2 doubling. The theme vowel reduces in this case because we have an ending, and that's going to clue us to what we have. The theme vowel is reduced, and there's an imperfect suffix, which is the shurik, and that rules out infinitive, and so we have a nifal imperative, and this is the ending that we have on masculine plurals, second masculine plurals in the imperfect. That'll give us an imperative masculine plural. The root here is shamar, and the translation would be kept, be guarded, something like that. The passive idea of the nifal, and it would be you all, you masculine plural, be kept. So it's talking to a group. Be kept. Let's look at example 2 now. We have daber. Daber. So there is no prefix or prefix vowel here. So that leads us to think we have either a cal or a pal. We look then at the R1. We have an R1 vowel of patach, under that dalet. There is no R1 doubling. This dagesh is a dagesh laney at the beginning of a word. So we have da. That patak rules out the kal, R1 vowel, and seems to be consistent with a piel infinitive construct or a piel imperative. Either one. R2 doubling, we do have R2 doubling, which is consistent with piel. The theme vowel is a tsere, and that is also consistent with our piel imperfect, which has E-class theme vowels. And finally, there's no imperfect suffix, and so this could be either a piel imperative, masculine singular, or a piel infinitive construct. And the root would be davar, to speak, and so we have either the imperative speak, as in you speak, masculine singular, or for the infinitive construct we have speaking or to speak. Okay, so piel imperative, masculine singular, or piel infinitive construct. Let's move on to our next example now. Our next one here is example 3. This is hakrave. Hakrave. Notice that we have a prefix of he and a prefix vowel of patach, and that tells us that we have a hiphil. This would either be an imperative or some kind of infinitive. The R1 vowel is a silent schwa, which is consistent with hiphil. There is no R1 doubling. And R2 doubling is not an issue now that we're looking at hiphil. In this case, there would be no R2 doubling anyway because we have a resh, but again, it's not an issue here. A theme vowel is important. That is a tsere, and that immediately limits our possibilities. We know that we do not have an infinitive construct now. And then we look at the suffix, and there is no imperfect suffix here. So that means that we could have either a hiphil imperative masculine singular or a hiphil infinitive construct. The root is karav, and hakrave, karav in the kal means to draw near. In the hiphil it would mean to bring near, to cause to come near, or to bring near. So the imperative masculine singular would be the command, bring near, bring him near, something like that. And the infinitive construct would be either bringing near or to bring near, depending on context and depending on if there was a preposition lamed in front of it. Okay, let's move on to example 4. Here we have sapari. Sapari. Now, it looks like there's no prefix or prefix vowel here. So again, we're looking at a kal or piel. The R1 vowel is a patach underneath the samach. There is no R1 doubling. The prefix vowel of patach eliminates the kal. Looking at piel and R2 doubling, we do have R2 doubling, so that confirms piel. In this case, the theme vowel is a vocal schwa because of the ending, and so we're not told a lot about the theme vowel here. The imperfect suffix is a 2fs imperfect suffix, and so we're looking at a piel imperative, that's what that patak under the first root letter tells us. It could be a PL or infinitive construct, but the ending is telling us that it is an imperative feminine singular of the root safar. Safar means to write in the cal. The PL can mean to write or to declare, to recount, or to count. In this case, we would maybe say declare as a command. You declare. In this case, feminine singular. So you, feminine singular, declare. So again, PL imperative feminine singular of safar. All right, let's look at example 5 now. We have bakesh, and we should be getting pretty good at figuring these kind out now. There's no prefix or prefix vowel. The R1 vowel under the bait is patach, and we should be getting the idea now that when we see that, we're looking at some kind of a PL imperative or infinitive construct. And the R2 doubling confirms PL. The theme vowel is tsere, which we expect for a PL. That's the vowel that we have in the imperfect, and that carries over into the imperative and into the infinitive construct. There's no imperfect suffix, so we're looking at either PL imperative or PL infinitive construct of the root bakash. And of course then we have the command seek, you seek, or the infinitive construct seeking or to seek. So PL imperative masculine singular, oh I didn't write that down, sorry, masculine singular, or PL infinitive construct. So again, these should become pretty straightforward to parse after you see them a few times. Let's move on to the next one here. Example 6. We've got nifkode. Nifkode. Now the prefix, again, it looks to me like we've got a root here of pakad. That's why vocabulary can come in handy, because I recognize this root. And so this would give me a prefix of noon with a hieroch, and this could be several things. This could be a cal imperfect, first common plural. It could be a nafal perfect. It could be a nafal imperfect, and then it could be a nafal alternate form of the infinitive absolute, and potentially a nafal participle. Now, generally when I look at a word like this, I don't run through every one of these possibilities in my head. I begin to look ahead and see what other evidence I can find. There's no R1 doubling, and the R1 vowel is a silent schwa, so this is not a nafal imperfect, because we would have a comets and doubling. There's no R2 doubling, which we don't expect in the nafal anyway. The theme vowel here is a holem vav, and that then, unless the cal imperfect first common plural was written with plenty spelling, you could conceivably have this here, but very unlikely. So probably we can eliminate the cal imperfect first common plural. Nifkode, we would expect to see like that, nifkode, if it was a cal imperfect first common plural. The nafal perfect would have an A-class vowel as its theme vowel. This has a holem vav, so this eliminates the perfect. And the participle would also actually have a long A. We haven't seen participles yet, but we would actually have a comets theme vowel for the participle. And so what we have left here is infinitive absolute, the alternate form of the infinitive absolute. So we have a nafal infinitive absolute, and the root is pakad, and the meaning here would be something like being visited. The passive of pakad, which is to visit or to appoint. So being visited. Finally, let's look at example 7. We have hazkir. Hazkir. Looks very much like we've got the root zakar. Let's move along with that understanding. So this means we would have a hey with a patak as the prefix and prefix vowel. That points to a hiphil, something under the imperfects. That would be either a hiphil imperative or infinitive construct or infinitive absolute. The R1 vowel is a silent schwa, which we expect for the hiphil. No R2 doubling. Notice we have a kaf, and the dagesh in here is a dagesh lani coming after the silent schwa. So hazkir rather than a hazkhir. The theme vowel is a hirik yod, and that's significant because that rules out imperative and rules out infinitive absolute because they have a theme vowel of tsere. So here we have a hiphil infinitive construct of zakar. Zakar in the kal is to remember. The hiphil would be cause to remember, or maybe bring to remembrance. Could be bringing to remembrance or to bring to remembrance. Either one. So bringing to remembrance or to bring to remembrance. Okay, so that's example 7. Those are our examples of the imperatives and the infinitives in the derived stems.